All right, what's up, y'all? It's Lord Psycho here with Dark Side TV, which is now rebranded to Dark Side World Order. New branding. Got a website out. I'm gonna leave it below. Y'all check out the clothes. And right here, right now, we're doing another episode of Left Hand Path Perspective. And we're here with a guest, which some of y'all are familiar with already, Corbin, aka Clip Out Quest.
How's it going, everybody?
And then we also have Julian, uh a cult, aka a cult catalyst, here with us too.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be with you.
So, Julian, introduce yourself a little bit. Where are you from? What type of stuff are you into spiritually?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I'm from Michigan, and I guess a lot of where I started, I grew up Catholic, so I kind of grew up with a lot of religious trauma, to be honest, of like where I'm at now and like my perspective of where I'm at now, and grew up with a lot of dogma, but went to like real, Catholic mass every Sunday and grew up with like adoration. And I was an altar boy. So the way I kind of grew up with ritual, and it wasn't something that was foreign to me, it was kind of something that I was very like initiated with. But as I kind of started to branch out when I was young, maybe like 14, I got into like kind of Wicca and stuff like that. And my parents kind of hated me for it. It was something they kind of demonized. And so I kind of put it away for a while. And as I became more of an adult, I kind of started to get more into like the dark arts and started to become drawn more to, I guess darker energies. But when I first started to enter magic, I got into ceremonial magic as it's presented, kind of a lot of like the using the LBRP and middle pillar and stuff a lot. And that was my main like base workings. And then I started to branch out into like the larger rituals of ceremonial magic, like the going up to like the supreme ritual, the pentagram, and stuff like that. And then I kind of started to feel more drawn towards, again, darker energies and going more towards that left and got sort of drawn towards the clip off after I started to work with Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So I got initiated to start working with Lilith, and that was mind blowing. Like honestly, when I first connected with her energy, it was truly like euphoric and like just energetic experiences I had ever really like touched with. And it really changed my perspective of what like connecting with the divine can be like. So as I have continued to walk the clip off and continued to connect with demonic energies and go back to angelic energies, my whole perspective has changed of like what divinity is like and what the universe needs to express itself like, if that makes sense. And so now I engage in like very regular ritual with demonic energies and kind of work more with expanding my gnosis and understanding of reality, if that makes sense.
Okay, very interesting background and interests. What did you mean by I think you said divinity and what it needs to create, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think I said like divinity and what it needs to express, and maybe need
Okay.
is a strong word, but I feel like it's trying to express is it's an infinite form, be it light or shadow, and the many chaotic forms it can expose itself to or express itself as, be it a demonic energy or an angelic energy or anything in between, because certainly we can't just categorize energies as those two, concepts or ideas. um, and I think truly consciousness has taken a profound step back into this world and connecting with people like us three here and many others, who are starting to awaken to a spiritual reality and trying to express itself through us to say, hey, there's a bigger picture here. And we all should awaken to a larger reality of harmonizing with working with one another on larger concepts of human ideas, if that makes sense.
For sure, for sure. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maybe mind me asking you a little bit more and we could all discuss on these topics. But you said you were Catholic and then Wiccan, and then you got into ceremonial magic, and now demonic. Is
A lot
this
of Buddhism. I just want to throw that in there. There's a lot of Buddhism in my path too.
for sure, for sure. Now, do you maybe create your own rituals a little bit sometimes, or do you still
Yeah,
follow certain grimoires?
not so much. I still like looking at grimoires for their ideologies and the concepts that they brought to life and seeing what they had to offer, in certain times and different people's ideologies. A lot of the rituals that I do nowadays are very intuitive or given to me from spirits.
Mhm.
So, say I light certain candles, do certain incense, various things, certain languages I speak in, maybe that don't make sense to me, but certain words I will be saying to invoke or manifest different things. I kind of see it more as like I see the weave, like I see the web of reality and the interconnectedness of all things. And I am kind of more able to tap into that and change like the weave of as is to fit a more destined will as it is how I see it, if that makes sense. So magic has definitely changed for me and how I perceive it and the way I receive it. Yeah.
And
De-
how has your life changed from, let's say, when you compare when you were into Wiccan practices compared to now? And I don't know if maybe Corbin or Justin or however you want to go by, if you want to jump in and offer a little bit of comparison of the experiences of both.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Julian. A lot of what you're explaining sounds familiar. So, yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about the difference between going from something like Catholicism to Wicca to Buddhism and perhaps some of the changes that has occurred along the way. Of
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to speak on some of this stuff. I appreciate you giving me the ground to open up.
course.
I guess when was in Catholicism, I felt very dogmatic and repressed in how I was expressing myself and trying to feel and understand who I was. And, in a lot of ways, I felt restricted to be in a certain manner within the restrictions of that religion. And when I started to open up to the ideologies of religions and aspects, be it Wicca or that there was some other type of energy outside of just the abstract God, that I started to appreciate more of like the nature spirits, and the spirits of the earth at the time. And really connecting with like, okay, there are spirits in this forest. There is like a Mother Earth. There is, like a father moon, father sun, like the sun is the divine masculine, the moon is the divine feminine, those types of things. And I think it started to kind of bring forth that ideology of alchemy in a way without, before I even understood Hermeticism or alchemy at all.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then when I started to open up more to, well, so I got into Hermeticism very heavily before I got into ceremonial magic. And the Kybalion was one of the first books that I really looked at that kind of opened my mind up to those Hermetic principles and stuff, because I feel like it's so approachable, to many to read and take in that information and be like, wow, that's something. But for me, it just said, there has to be more. So I kept diving in. And I think last year, so since diving into ceremonial magic to demonology to like full spirit communication to full awakening or wherever I am now, it's only been about 2 years. But in those last 2 years, I read about 18 books. I got really into Israeli regards, Black Book and stuff like that, and those practices. I think largely it changed my perspective on what religion or spiritual perspective could be without limitation or dogma on self, and seeing that one could be equal with divinity, seeing that we didn't have to put ourselves within a hierarchy to fit within a spiritual concept or idea, that we could be equal with what we thought was our creator and be both creator and createe at the same time, be both experiencer and experience together, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I've stepped into and where I can be now and what I appreciate. from where I've stepped forth in the last 5, 6 years, I guess.
Mm, sounds familiar. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I could step in now. So you mentioned the Kabbalion was one of the first works that you sort of picked up that was somewhat hermetic or esoteric in nature. It was one of the first ones that I picked up as well. Alchemy was one of the larger lenses that I began to see the occult through.
Mhm.
And I love what you said about like the sun and the moon. Like I literally have this thing behind me on my bookshelf to remind me, and these are the symbols that I use for Sol, Luna, and Terra. But it's to remind
Yeah.
me that like even though I'm working with like chakras and demons and perhaps the zodiac to some degree, like the sun and the moon and the earth are right here, and they are very powerful forces, and they are very closely uh, they closely connect us to each other, which is another thing that you said that I really liked was you were alluding to the idea, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you were alluding to the idea that through by connecting through each other to some degree.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Elijah, I watched your interview, your most recent one, and I kind of took a couple notes and had a few questions that I might ask you. Is that okay?
For sure, for sure.
So you said that you use like traditional sigils for demons for the most part. So do you mostly
Yes.
use like Ars Goetia type spirit?
Um, well, Azazel is not from the Goetia, right? He's not.
Nope.
No.
Um, Lucifer isn't for sure either. And Pazuzu, which I've worked with recently, he's from the Necronomicon, but he also has other origins and stuff. But I use
Yeah.
the Necronomicon sigil.
And then another thing is you talked about manifestation a good bit,
Uh-huh.
but you never mentioned a technique. Is that anything you're open to opening up to? Is like any techniques that you use for manifestation specifically? Like I have a
Well,
pretty specific like ritual that I use typically, that's a set form for manifestation. I just wonder if you have something similar.
I actually haven't developed a manifestation uh ritual for myself at all, to be honest. I usually, well, when you do magic, it's to manifest, but like I usually do more rituals to evolve myself, and then to manifest, I do a lot of affirmations like every day. I have some on my wall right now that whenever I feel like uh spaced out or thinking about a lot of stuff, I just keep it simple. I go to my board and just repeat that to myself a few times, or even if I'm out somewhere and I'm overthinking and stuff, I say things like, I am financially stable, happy, and abundant. I am a master and successful in all my passions. I attract everything I desire with ease. Those are the ones I have on my board that sometimes I'll just repeat
Love
them.
it.
Yeah, I love it too, bro. I think that's
Or
super
or
powerful. And
or lately I've been doing sigils and I'll write them in affirmation form and break them down. I
yeah,
do the deconstruction method.
kind of a darker one I have for you. You okay with
Okay,
doing
okay.
it?
Yeah.
Um, we talked about or in your interview like blood offering, mentioned like a lot of practitioners use like a diabetic Lancet, and you said that you go to like a little bit more of a graphic thing, maybe we'll call it self-mutilation, something like that, Do you feel like that intensity brings more power to your ritual and that your sacrifice of like a little more pain as opposed to like a prick of the finger is bringing more energy to your manifestation or whatever you're doing?
I actually do feel like it feels like super powerful, like ridiculously powerful. Like
Yeah.
Like I feel like when I do that versus let's say somebody just getting into magic, that they're just doing some basic thing, looking at a sigil, or even they're following a grimoire, like it still won't be as powerful as what I'm doing.
Absolutely. No, I can respect that. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask was just if you felt like, that lended its power to what you're doing for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very special offering. Like it feels like they connect with you more, like they respect you more a little bit since you're showing them more respect and more of a sacrifice.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, last one I'll go to for now is I'm not very familiar with Asdusius, right? And
I'm
I
do
think that's a very fascinating Amdusius, is that right?
Mm, mm,
Okay. And it talked about how it gave you some empowerment for learning to do vocal screens and stuff like that in
Yes.
your trap music. So how did that, I know Corbin kind of touched upon it, but like how did that correlate? Like did you truly just feel like you grasped it quicker? Like you just learned the innate ability to do so faster than you would naturally just trying to grasp it on your own?
Yes, because the screaming is actually something I've always tried to do, like my whole like music the whole time I've been into music pretty much. So definitely when I tried to tune into that, uh it was definitely accelerated, especially with the help of Ambrosius.
interesting. Mm.
So I can relate, just not in the same way, but working with spirits. So I directly asked for an increase in consciousness and intellect, and I feel like my ability to grasp material and understand it has been like heightened way more than like what I should have the ability to do so.
For sure, for sure.
So I just relate in asking like, a demonic spirit or any spirit for the ability to do something that certainly can manifest through you and comes to fruition. And it's a weird experience, but it's very powerful.
Mhm.
What's your input on this? What would you like to
I'm
I
just
usually in my videos I've called you Justin, but you also have Corbin on your screen. Which do you prefer?
I most people know me by Corbin. I also go by Zach. I have several pseudonyms and sobriquets because I have many different projects that I'm working on. But Corbin is how most people know me.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, I was just kind of sitting back taking in the dialogue. But as far as using spirits, especially more infernal spirits, to achieve goals that I had trouble achieving, um, it definitely seems as though there's like an increase in interest toward the thing, but there's also an increase in opportunity outwardly.
Yes,
And
agree,
and
agree.
also it's things just line up. It's like you create a density. Your intention and your will creates a gravity, and that gravity creates a density in the fabric or the weave, and it draws things to it. Like if you were to put a, I've explained it before, like putting a bowling ball on a blanket, it would draw other things toward that center, essentially. Like anything else that were on the bed would roll toward that. And that's, I don't know, sort of how it feels to me to some degree.
Right now, what's
I
on my
can't agree
mind is
more.
Hmm.
is maybe asking you, you guys like a crazy story you guys have had, and I was thinking of a few with Santa Muerte, but some of them are like too crazy for me to say. I would have to say it in person. But
Yeah,
I could
I
think
relate
of
to some of that.
I could think of other ones in the meantime, but I don't know if y'all have any that come to mind.
I've told enough stories. Go ahead. If any come to mind, Julian, please go ahead. I've told enough stories, but I don't want to put you on the spot. If none come to mind, I'm sure I can stir one out of the pot.
So I'll just I'm gonna be totally like bare my soul. Elijah, you mentioned shamanism a little bit, right?
Okay, okay,
So I'm a little bit into like I guess I'd call it modern shamanism. Like I kind of do my own thing, but I'm very into like,
okay.
getting into psilocybin or
Nice.
different psychedelics and stuff like that, and changing of consciousness and getting to where you can have a heightened state of awareness and stuff like that. So I have a very, very close relationship with Lilith. I believe that in my understanding, attain three levels of attunement with a spirit. I believe at level one, you kind of understand the spirit, are beginning to work with it, do offerings and rituals for it. At level two, you're kind of starting to, work with totally integrating that spirit and bring it into your field of energy, and bring it into yourself. And I believe at like a level three type of attunement, you're completely bonded and integrated with that spirit. You know what I mean? Like it's 100% in your energy field and you are it and it is you. So I took psilocybin the other day, and it was a very intense experience, but I invoked Lilith at the time, as I usually do, and I asked for her to take full control of my body, and my entire like field of vision was like wiped out with like pink and like a complete feminine energy like took over like my whole like perception of reality, and I was absorbed in this very like loving, compassionate, euphoric, like just complete perception, and it was full, and I loved it. But it's a very crazy experience because like having an energy completely like wipe over your entire like perception of self is a
Uh-huh.
very odd experience, you know? Um, I like to open myself up to possession. I've done it with a few entities. And I mean, it's not like for me, like they take full control of my body and are walking around doing chaotic things. It's that I entirely feel their being within me and like their thoughts and my thoughts are one within the moment.
I feel
Um,
like
so like for me, that's a very outstanding experience. And I'm not sure if you guys can relate to that, but like it's definitely profound, you know?
I feel like the
Absolutely.
type of workings I do with spirits, it brings me to that level, especially if I really take it serious and build a relationship with them. Yeah, it'd be like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I
No,
relate
it's
to
amazing.
100%. Like it feels like, let's say Lucifer, who I've worked with a lot, if I
Yeah.
if I'm in a phase that I'm really taking the working serious, it feels like like our the thoughts are like intertwined, like it's hard to explain.
No, it is. It is. But I get you. Yeah. I think all three of us kind of understand exactly what we're talking about, you know. I like
Yeah,
to
sounds
refer
familiar.
to it as mental transference, you know, or,
Mhm.
you can call it telepathy or anything, but it's literally like another being is within you and you are perceiving it. And for me, at first, it was odd. Like I had to question myself and remain skeptical. Like, I like the idea of like, am I losing it or am I finding it? Right? Like it's that fine line of like, am I going insane or like
Well,
am I figuring out
that
what
Oh,
reality is, you know?
that's the psychonaut chaos magician
Yeah.
string. That's
well,
the rope. That's the string.
Yeah. I love
technically,
it.
technically, we don't have to get too deep into it, so we don't get thrown away or some shit. But if technically, if we consider, we probably have like to society, it's mental illness and stuff. But
Oh,
Yeah.
reality, like it's is real shit. Like it has profound effects. Like there's no denying it. So
I think society just hasn't yet got to the point of understanding what people like us are experiencing and are awakened to. And
yeah.
we don't yet have necessarily a label or a diagnosis for it that would help or help people like us integrate what we're experiencing, you know.
Hmm.
And I think maybe in the future, people like us will help make that a reality where we are understood as being maybe visionaries or channels or vessels or whatever you want to refer to yourself as, insert chaos magician label here, right?
mhm.
I think that's the thing is that we're opening up to a larger reality where spiritual being is integrated with human life more, you know?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Or that we're recognizing it more, perhaps.
Sure.
It's not as hidden as it used to be.
But it's funny
Right.
because I agree with you. I feel that way. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like we're also like losing connection in a lot of ways as well. So like there's this weird dichotomy because I mean we do live in this like dualistic reality, but I feel like the ancients and our ancestors used to be more, call it clairvoyant if you will, but I feel like they used to have a much stronger connection with the astral. And I feel like they used to have much greater control over the etheric and or chi or prana. So it's weird. It's like we're becoming more aware of this thing, perhaps because we're getting further away from it. So now we're able to see the forest through the trees, uh, type thing. But we're also like able to capture less of the lumber from that field. I don't know.
Sure, sure.
I sense this weird tension happening. I don't know.
I
No,
think
it
it's
makes sense
cool
to
to be
me.
honest. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. But before we get too far off track, because there's a lot of cool things that come to mind, thinking about how the world is going. But um, relating to what we just talked about of mental illness and shamanism, and then I have another thing I wanted to say about Lilith that would be interesting to tie into this. One thing I've heard about shamanism, I've heard some shamans they have like schizophrenia, but they consider it like healthy schizophrenia. I don't know the exact term, but I've heard something like that. I think
Well,
maybe I read it in one.
historically speaking, the like there you weren't just like, okay, I'm gonna be the village shaman today.
Yeah.
And you weren't just like born and like, okay, well what do I want to be? Like you were typically classified as like something like a warrior or something like a craftsman or something like that. The
Mhm.
shamans were the physically deformed, the physically ailed, the mentally sick.
Mm.
Um, Something to do with being half in, half out,
Mm.
1 foot in, 1 foot out, but also something to do with the theme of the wounded healer, the bleeding heart. It's something about, and this is something I talk about on my channel a lot, but it's like the more pain you go through, like the more you know how to cause that pain to other people, but also the more you know how to prevent it as well. And so because they're like, you know, potentially under constant duress. They're constantly aware of the fact that they can help other people. That's
Mm.
something that resonates with me very deeply. Um, but yeah, I mean, maybe that's why. Maybe that's one of the reasons why. Because I've I can't help but feel like maybe that's one of the reasons why bad things happen to good people is because like every single time you make it through a bad situation, like one time you can help an infinite number of people through that same situation, you know, over and over and over. So maybe that's why there's that like wounded healer, like deformed shaman uh, theme or I don't know, archetype. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah. What's your input, Julian?
So I definitely feel like there's a connection between mental health, and getting into the occult or magic, for some people, not all. Personally, I actually am diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I
Okay.
definitely think that plays into it. So I go through manic phases where, I'm on top of the world and feel like everything's under my control and I can do anything. And I go through those heavy depressive phases where I am completely defeated and I feel like but the end. Um, but a lot of me has kind of transcended that through spiritual working and
Right.
understanding like who and what I am, and with the various spirits to not only integrate my traumas and my emotional misunderstandings I've had in my life, but also just to fully understand who I am. And a major component of my spiritual workings for me was learning self-love and self-worth, because
Mm.
those were two things I definitely did not have and have gained, I
Agreed.
will say, in like the last month or two. Like it's been a very recent thing that I've gained, and it's awesome and I love it, but I totally owe it to spirit investing their time in me and showing me that I am worth my salt, you know?
It's
But
a two-way
I think
street,
that
brother.
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I think what you put into the universe, you get back out of the universe, and it kind of teaches you what you are and what to integrate into yourself and what to put out there and bring into your being, you know? But yeah, there's definitely an interplay for me between mental health, magic, the occult, and spirituality. And I think people who are predisposed to having some sort of mental illness type situation are likely to find help in spirituality and maybe even to say it a cure, you know.
Hmm. It's fascinating how much I can already tell that we seem to have in common. I was also diagnosed, well, back when I was diagnosed, when, like I don't know, dinosaurs were still walking around. And they called it manic depression back then.
Yep,
But I think nowadays it's called bipolar 2. Uh, and
yep.
it makes me wonder how much of that is related to the dualistic raised in. Everything is good or bad. That I don't know. I don't know. It just makes me wonder, I guess. But yeah, that's definitely interesting to me. That sounds familiar again. The bipolar thing and leading potentially to spirituality and the spirituality then helping with those things because my I don't know if you'd call them cycles or rhythms, but they have I don't go as high and as low anymore, and like
Hmm.
the time between isn't as drastic. Like I can
Yep.
just tell I'm a little manic this week or a little depressed this week because I'm either trying to do too much for my focus and attention or I'm not doing enough. Or I don't feel like I'm doing enough no matter how much I do, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And through spirituality, I feel like, I mean, call it magic, call it spirituality, call it seeking the self. I don't know, but through that, I feel like that has improved so drastically, and I'm so thankful for that.
Nailed it for me, man.
That's good. That's good. So earlier you mentioned Lilith and how it was like a pink energy, correct?
At the time, yeah, that's how I perceived it. She's like definitely like the dark feminine archetype. However, like the relationship I've entered with her is like very affectionate and like overly feminine and passionate. That
Have
was
you
how I
ever
perceived it, definitely like under the psychedelic influence.
have you ever sensed maybe like a pink and orange, or was it just pink?
Yeah, definitely like pink and orange, like a flare up, you know. It's hard to describe color like under the influence of a psychedelic, you know, like they're so like there's like I forget the synesthesia, is that the word? You know,
Synesthesia.
senses kind
Like,
of yeah,
Synesthesia,
like
yeah.
senses kind of blend, you know, and stuff like that. So, but that's yeah, that's how I perceived it, yeah.
mm,
But a lot of like symbols in my vision, like it's kind of hard to describe, but it's like you're in hyperspace, you know, but at the same time you're perceiving your surroundings. But like overlay of like symbology and like ritualistic like layer, and it was her, you know. I don't know how else to describe it.
yeah. Well, I have some experiences I would like to share that relate to that a little bit. When I was on the first year of getting into the left-hand path, I believe it was, um, and I had known about Lilith, and I was on shrooms painting, and like for some reason, I felt Lilith's energy, and I could actually bring the painting, but
I was actually going to ask if we could see it. That's awesome.
right.
Oh wow,
Excellent.
that's
And
that's very cool.
I was sensing like pink and orange energy. And I also have a girlfriend right now that she has been working with Lilith, and she's been having dreams that she sees like pink and orange eyes.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Hmm. So maybe like I feel like maybe pink is not a super popular mainstream color associated with her, but maybe to people who tap
I
in.
would disagree. Have you not seen all of the magenta lately? Dude, magenta has completely like flooded the media. Like
Mhm.
magenta is everywhere and it's almost always pointing toward very Lilithian things. And in my opinion.
Mhm.
I like it.
Brian.
I, I feel like she likes it, so
What was that again?
I feel like she likes it, magenta.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Probably.
I've noticed three colors specifically
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working with psychedelics and entities.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always it's like citrine, magenta, and like turquoise or teal. Um, I'm not exactly sure what, but it's there's just this persistence of those three colors. And the magenta one definitely seems, and not just in psychedelics, I mean, when I'm having a psychotropic experience, I mean, even ritually speaking, I don't have to be on an entheogen or a psychedelic. These colors, like, especially if I'm doing very shamanic like things where I'm going very, very deep and I'm letting go of a lot of things, those three colors have been very prominent. And the magenta one, has been very Lilithian. I don't know how else I would describe it. Very very coalescing and coercing, but also it's like it's tempting and reassuring at the same time. Without using entity
Well,
names, I guess that's how I would describe it. But yeah,
well, I
I've
mean,
noticed that as well.
she is the temptress, right? I mean, she is the one that tempts you into desire, but I also feel like she's also the lover, like the eternal lover of the divine masculine. So when you embody that divine masculine energy within yourself, like there you go, like boom, there it
Right.
is. That's your
And that's
eternal soulmate, or however you want to call it. But I also think it kind of transcends like the identity of Lilith and goes further into the just feminine goddess archetype overall. And be it Hecate, be it, Gaia, be it, name it female goddess, I think it's the same energy speaking to us through a different label, different lens, of that. But Lilith is who I connect with to that identity of the divine feminine and what works through me, I guess,
sure. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And that makes me wonder, like those other three colors, like I noticed Trinity a lot within existence.
Oh
Electrons,
yeah,
protons, neutrons, etc. So these three colors, I feel like the turquoise one is like the divine masculine, like in its correct polarity almost, which makes me think that the citrine, that orange color I see, is like the sun, like the child of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which is interesting because the sun is kind of orange, and you mentioned also like the orange mixing with the pink, and the sun and the mother are always an embrace, and a lot of
yeah.
traditional imagery. So I guess I had to put my 2 cents in there. Sorry if I'm stepping over.
I love it.
Oh, not at all. Um, this that we're touching on, it also ties into how we were talking about earlier, the sun and the moon, and
Right, exactly.
th- those are energies I like to keep in mind both in workings plus being more masculine, things of that nature, and or maybe even being more lunar in certain times. I don't know if maybe you guys could give some insight on lunar and solar energy. That's stuff we've talked about on this channel before.
Julian,
So
would you like
like
to?
in
Yeah.
yeah, in practicality, I did where, I mean, I still do like a solar meditation in the morning as the sun rises if I have time, my day
Mm,
allows, you know. And I always do a lunar meditation because, you know, how do you not get out with the moon's out, you know, unless you're a third shifter or something and missing it. But, you know, it's easy to connect those energies in that manner and dedicate like 15, 20 minutes of your time to just sitting with, okay, here's the sun above me. I'm breathing in the sun. I'm taking in that orange energy. You know, you're feeding. I know you like chakras, Elijah, and you know, you're feeding that sacral chakra, that solar plexus chakra with that orange energy, you know, fusing it in. And then you do that lunar meditation, you're bringing that silver light, envisioning that moon above you, you know what I mean? Breathing in that silver light and infusing that
hmm
intuition and that femininity and everything.
hmm
I think what became so important with me and why I started to step away from ceremonial magic a bit is it felt overtly masculine, where it felt like it lacked a little bit of that feminine intuition and like
Yes.
witchcraft and spell working and stuff like that. So I started to integrate more of that, and I feel like now I've reached like a place in my being where I'm almost like androgynous. Not that I'm like gender fluid or trying to be weird with what I'm saying, but I feel very integrated in both like masculine and feminine energies.
Sure.
And I
hmm
feel like although on my channel a lot, like I do a lot of channeled messages of Lilith, you know, and stuff like that. And she's very kind to allow me to be a vessel of her and speak her truth and words and stuff like that as she comes through me and through my perspective and lens, you know, it's always going to be channeled through what Julian is, right? I can't speak exactly what Lilith is because I'm not that, but you know, it's a graceful thing, but I'm certain that some people think it might be a little odd that, you know, a man might step into the role of trying to approach Lilith in such a intimate manner of trying to speak with her and as her and for her. And for me, it feels true to me and like who I am. And I feel like I want to step into that role and embrace that because it feels like my truth, like a part of me, you know, like it's so integrated into my being that that's what I want to do. But yeah, going back to like the sun and the moon and working with those energies, I think developing the time and practice for both of them completes like a balanced and integrated being where you can appreciate both that masculine and feminine energy and really bring it together to be balanced, right? That's the goal. I love how we talk left hand path, right hand path, all this stuff, but we can't forget middle path, right? And
hmm
I'm not trying to take the trance over to stepping into Buddhism, but I mean it is a approach, you know, and all these paths that we're talking about and stepping into the occult, I think meditation practices lends itself sort of to Buddhist philosophy and trying to separate self from attachment and desire to basify what self is and become anatman or no self, right? The no thing, the awareness behind the perceiver, right? I feel like that's where true power is and true integration is stepping into that awareness and being like, okay, I no longer want to be this or that. I want to be. If that makes sense at all, I'm more speaking,
Yeah,
but
and I think I would tend to agree with everything that you said. And is like with the Buddhism, like there's a lot that we could talk about left-hand pathwise about Buddhism, I think. But I want to take one step back first and ask you, because you mentioned the Sol Luna masculine feminine energy, and you mentioned how ceremonial magic or perhaps an overbalance of it can felt overly masculine. And I think in my experience that has a lot to do with how much planning that there is and how much math and geometry and all of that is so intellectual as opposed to, like you said, intuitional or
Mhm.
artistic, perhaps is another way to look at it. But
I
I love,
agree.
yeah, I totally agree. Please go ahead.
I think another layer on top of that is I feel like speaking God names like Ahie and saying
Yeah,
literally I am, like I am God is a very
but
masculine step up to say like I am the one, you know.
for sure,
But
no,
like
I definitely get that. But I mean, well, that it almost sounds like
I feel
from
like
that
all I would add
perspective,
is the feminine step back is to be more intuitional and be like, I am perceiving, like I am being, instead of taking
I
ceremonial
agree.
magic,
I
which
agree.
feels like a declaration, and being more like I want to just perceive and exist. I don't know.
I agree. I it just from what you said, it almost sounds like from that perspective that ceremonial magic and the god names of the Western Hermetic tradition, uh, for one example, are mutually exclusive. But I don't believe that, and I don't think that you believe that.
No, no, and I
It's
don't mean to
I
say
don't.
that exactly.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I felt like I was misunderstanding what you were saying. Because ceremonial magic certainly can can be done in a completely feminine way.
Yeah,
But it's just the idea of the god names like Yehovah and Ehie, and all of that, I agree, is an overly masculine formula, especially if it's done too often. But yeah, I just needed clarification because I'm like surely he doesn't think that like only ceremonial magic is like
no, I more
tied
meant
to like
like,
the
I guess
Golden Dawn or oh
it,
and speaking of the Golden Dawn, I wanted to ask you one other thing. You mentioned greeting the sun, and you also mentioned doing like the LBRP and like the supreme invoking rituals and things. So were you doing like Liber
yeah,
Res and things to like that as well? Okay,
yes.
I was just wondering.
So
So
hang
yeah,
on, I
I
have
was just
to,
wondering.
there's a book that I picked up that's like fucking great for like picking up magic and all that. And is it like, I don't know. It's called The Adventure of a Magus. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, Adventures of a Magus or
Like,
Magus. Yeah, yeah.
hang on, I unplugged my shit.
Uh-oh, I can still hear you.
I unplugged my headphone. This book, Adventures of a Magus, Knox
Hmm.
edition. It's by, I forget the name, Mars Newman. And in it has a bunch of like graphic depictions of how to do different like Golden Dawn tradition, ceremony, magic stuff, as well as like different Aleister Crowley rituals within like Thelema. And I followed this book like intensely and did these rituals like daily, man. And it's really powerful stuff. I recommend this book to anybody who wants to walk the path of ceremonial magic, but it's a
Very
weird one,
interesting.
you know?
I've been meaning to look into that. It's on my list, but I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah, it's a good like graphic depiction of how to do the symbols and draw them and everything like that as you're going along it, instead of trying to read it and depict it in your head and all that.
Hmm.
But yeah, so yeah, and all these different practices that were kind of aligned with Golden Dawn and stuff like that. That's what I originally picked up was I started learning from like Damien Eccles, and his book like
Okay.
High Magic and Angels and Archangels, and kind of developed from there.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with Damien Eccles, but I've never read any of their work. I've never practiced any of their techniques. Several of my clients ask me questions about things that he says, and some things I agree with, some things I don't. But we come from a different place. But I do find that
Yep.
I think most of what he says is in line with my experience as well, and I like that he takes a relatively syncretic approach with his perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, They felt approachable in the way that he taught it. And then I
Mm,
started to kind of unalign with some of the things he was teaching. And it was like, okay, that's not my gnosis. That's not what I align with. You know what I mean? And it
yeah.
doesn't fit with my reality, but I can appreciate it. But he definitely
Hmm.
was a strong teacher in the beginning with how he approached the LBRP and going up to like the hexagram rituals and stuff like that, I think is most of what he covered. So,
Elijah, have you read any of Damien Nichols' work or watched any of his videos?
No, but as some input, I could ask Julian a question. So for someone that well, I wanted to ask a question plus I would like to hear y'all's information on Buddhism and how it ties to the left-hand path, as well as I'm sure the audience would love to hear it. But real quick, the question about for somebody who, let's say, they started off only with chaos magic, um, what what are they missing by skipping over ceremonial magic, and what is maybe something they could look at that might be useful to them? And I would be in this pool myself because I haven't really delved into the traditional grimoires that much. Has been mostly intuitive work. But what do you think, Julian?
So I guess for me, a little bit what I think you would be missing in my book, the foundations, if I can call it that.
Hmm.
Because basically, you can take the LBRP and you can break it down. You can say, hey, I don't want to use Raphael. I don't want to use Mikael. I don't want to use Uriel. You know what I mean? I use archangels and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
you can say instead, I want to use Lilith. I want to use Samael. I want to use Asmodee. Like these different entities that you want to invoke in that manner and still draw. And it's a very powerful ritual to create and drawing them in the different directions and stuff like that. And if you want to branch that out to chaos magic, I think that's exactly what you're doing by saying, hey, no, instead, I'm going to insert this.
Exactly.
I'm going to branch it out to this. So you're creating a foundation of it, a basic understanding of what ritual can look like
Yeah.
before you go to more the intuitive stuff where you're like kind of building out of nowhere, you have some ideas of what ritual is for some people who don't. So even like I have a friend named who is in India and he's Hindu. And
Okay.
so for him, the LBRP seemed unapproachable. And I simply told him the same advice like, no, insert Shiva, like insert Brahman, insert Vishnu, like the gods that you believe in, put them in there, and call upon them. There's no reason for you to call upon these Western deities if you don't feel interacting with them. And that's totally okay. So I feel like it branches into chaos magic that you can then take those foundational principles and extend them into what you want to create and manifest. So that's a lot of what my magic looks like nowadays. Is similar to you with using candles,
Mhm.
incense, offerings and stuff like that. On
Yeah.
top of that, I'll go draw symbols with a wand, and direct energies and stuff like that,
Mhm.
which I think builds a lot more potential manifestation, like potential around what you're doing.
Mhm.
So I think ceremonial magic has great potential in teaching early practitioners foundation practices to get deep into meditational practices as well as ritualistic practices.
Mhm.
And I can't speak enough about the middle pillar. I just want to
For real.
exacerbate that the middle pillar is super important. And I do believe that the middle pillar activates more consciousness energy centers than it does like energetic sensors or centers like the chakras. I think they're two separate systems that interlay on top of one another, doing both chakra work and the middle pillar,
I
and then
agree actually. I have some
branching out from the
experience
middle
like that.
pillar to like the flaming sword and the lightning path is where you're going to complete what you need to do with inside your body, create a light body, so you can let divinity come in. I'll shut up. That's what I
That's
had
Yeah,
to say.
interesting. No, no, no.
I
That's
agree.
interesting.
Yeah.
But before we get into Buddhism real quick, I wanted to say actually the middle pillar is something that I haven't done ritual for, but I do middle pillar meditations, and like I said, or as we spoke on, the moon and the sun is involved in that, as well as the earth.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I actually developed a prayer with all the middle pillar spheres and correlating them to the archangels, which is another, I guess, form of manifestation, if you want to say. I before, like,
Yeah.
I was in a super dark place, and I developed that prayer with the archangels in the middle pillar, mentioning the moon, the sun, the earth, all that. and like it helped me type shit. I was in a really
That's
dark place. I had
that's
I'd
excellent.
gone to I'd gone to jail like 3 times. Uh, like I was working a hard job, a lot of bills, and paying lawyer fees, all that stuff, and I got myself out.
Oh, that's great, man. I think it's such strong work to do with yourself and helps you pull you out of definitely some dark situations. And I've been there, like we mentioned mental illness, and I've hit my lowest point where I'm like, yo, bro, I'm out, and working with spiritual energies and within my own energies and conscious, yeah, I pulled myself out of some dark places. So to
Mhm.
you, man, and cheers to anybody who's working on that to pull themselves out of hell,
Absolutely.
you can get through it.
For sure, for sure.
I'd like to continue on about ceremonial magic if that's all right with you guys, because I think there's still that was an excellent question. And I think that there's a lot of fruit in that field. So if you don't mind if I or Julian, did you have anything else to add about ceremonial magic in relation to chaos magic?
Not yet, brother. I'd like to hear you.
So you mentioned, well, first that I think are very, very powerful points. One, you called it foundation. I think you might have been touching on what I understand as like just discipline. Um, is that does that resonate with you?
100%, yeah.
Okay, so discipline from the ceremonial aspect of it. I mean, I could go on about the discipline of it in so many ways because you're not just creating discipline of your routine. Like you're creating discipline of your energy body, you're creating discipline of your mental body, your astral body. You're learning to think about things in so many different ways. Planetary hours, correspondences, directions. I mean, and it teaches you to sort of stack and combine and synergize things. And though that is the heart of chaos magic in a lot of ways, I think people sit like they connect in a shallow way across things, which does work for certain things. But I think learning like the doctrine of signatures or the doctrine of correspondences and learning to really combine things together was maybe the most important thing that I learned from ceremonial magic. But aside from the discipline and the correspondence aspect of it, you talked about the wand and drawing symbols and glyphs and things. There's something there's something about the wand. There really is. And when I try to approach what that is from as intellectual of a place as I possibly can, I could go on about the intuitional and artistic applications of it. But intellectually, the just the idea of extending your awareness outside of yourself into something else, like an athame or a wand, already kickstarts the gears and the cogs to get you outside of yourself into a different perspective. So I think that is also something that is invaluable from, if you call it the Western tradition, perhaps. But yeah, that's two things that you brought up about ceremonial magic that I think are invaluable points. I don't know if that resonates with you about extending the energy outside of yourself and the attention and the awareness that goes with that.
Yeah, I would touch upon one thing that I started without tools. I
Same.
had, a couple of candles, incense, a few things like that, did offerings, but I had no wand, I had nothing, man. I had no crystals, I had nothing really to do magic with, I guess. And what I learned was it didn't feel necessary. Like I could still do workings without it, even
Mhm.
though the ritual would call for it. Hey, get your wand, do this. And I would use my hand. I would direct energy with my hand, be it right hand for, pushing out and left hand for taking, receiving. But
Sure.
when I did add the wand and I got the athame, it was different, if you know what I
Mhm.
mean.
Oh
Like
yeah, 100%.
I could cut through the energy. I could pass the energy. I could move it. And it
Yeah.
was I could before, but not like this. And it was, oh, okay, I get it. But I want to say I gained a greater appreciation for the tool itself and its extension of me when I was using it, as from when I didn't have it and didn't use it. You know what I mean? Like not having them in the beginning, I think gave me a greater benefit to using them later.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, understanding what they symbolize and like these are tools. They're anchors for energies. So understanding what they're an anchor for helps that energy congeal and integrate into the atmosphere and into the item.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
Okay,
it's
so
wild, but
I have a question I could ask. Um, so I've I've I have a collection of grimoires and I've gone through a lot, but they're not the traditional ones. They're more modern. Is there any maybe grimoires y'all could recommend that maybe are have infernal workings but have a lot of the traditional stuff too?
what do you got,
Julian, you
Corbin?
have anything to say about that?
So I didn't dive too hard into traditional grimoires. I did get into like Solomonic magic a bit, but
Okay,
to me, honestly, to me, this is just my opinion. Solomonic magic feels fucking rude. Like I don't feel like we should treat spirits like that. I don't think it's like a think we should
I
be
agree. I agree.
respectful and reverent and not commanding and using tools to inflict and, make them bend to our will. I think working with them instead of like against them is more to our benefit. So I kind of moved away from that. However, I would say the Picatrix, are you familiar with that, Elijah?
No, no. What is that?
The Picatrix is an old grimoire. I don't remember what century, probably like near 15th century. Was it written by Iamblichus?
Iamblichus, it
I
might
believe
have been. It might have been.
Iamblichus. Yeah, so pretty old, but it kind of teaches you like how to connect astrology and different correspondences with strong magic workings and different like sigils to work with and stuff like that. And it's honestly kind of a hard read. It's very dense. But if you can read it and you can get through it and try to learn even just a little bit of something from it, it will bring a lot of potential to what you're doing.
Okay, okay.
Hmm.
I'll take that into consideration.
Yeah,
Uh,
I landed in a pretty similar place as well, as far as it feeling rude and just, I mean, not necessarily outdated, but just, I don't, rude is a good word. I essentially found myself in a place where I was using those grimoires to inform my own relationship with them based on what the grimoire suggested the spirit was related to. So like the Key of Solomon, the Clavicula Salomonis, and like books like that, I would look through them and I would learn about the spirits. I would learn about, whatever like triplicity or whatever zone they were related to of the universe. And then I would like intuitively, artistically create a relationship with that spirit. And had just much better feeling about doing that. I can't help but wonder how much some of those techniques were like blinds to protect the Magi themselves. Because if they were working with infernal forces back then, and it said, "Hey, offer it some tea," and sing it a song, that would have definitely been heretical. But if it says hold it at sword point, which hold it at sword point could mean use your element of wind, have a conversation with it.
Right.
Hold it at sword point might mean focus on it. But it was perhaps encoded and
Yeah.
blinded, like many of the alchemical manuscripts were. But then over time, as it manifests, further and further, it was taken literally. I just can't help but wonder that. If that's a potential, if that's a possibility. I'm not saying it is, I don't know.
I definitely see that.
I think people could take things in a lot of ways. For example, um Lilith being known for killing babies and things like that, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what followers of her have to do, but it could recommend, I mean not recommend, it could symbolize certain things when you hear stories like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, sacrificing potential for something else. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. What do you think, Julian?
That symbolically speaks of Lilith talking about the transformation and liberation that she stands for. Because I see her and experience her as a spirit of like absolute limitless freedom and liberation, like
For sure.
Mm.
unapologetically so.
Sure.
Like if we could live
100%.
without morals and just do whatever the fuck we wanted, you know what I mean? That's Lilith, right? But like I think in some ways that the, taking of babies and stuff like that is to symbolize that rebirth, that absolute like taking of the born to become the unborn, right? Like the liberated soul, like the free being, the sovereign one.
Well,
Um,
and
and
children
I think
represent
that's
youth too, right? So,
yeah.
like, there's that, yeah.
So, we talked about her being the temptress and stuff like this. So I think she is to tempt you into your own liberation. I think she's to tempt you into being your own tempest, your storm, your chaos, your voice and unapologetically being yourself, right, to the world. And obviously there's limits to that with inside of what's culturally acceptable and stuff like that. That's what it's breaking away from is cultural norm. I can't even talk about Lilith on TikTok really because it's outside cultural norm and I get banned, bro. It's kind of wild, but yeah, I think it's symbolically representing what she is the mother of darkness, right? She's the birther of the unknown and the keeper of mysteries. So it's no wonder back in like Sumeria or Babylon, they buried those bowls inscribed with her name to ward her off from taking the children, from pregnant mothers or, people who just had children and stuff like that. Because certainly they were trying to fend off something they were afraid of taking away what was they thought theirs as they're trying to form this being into being uh, a thing, a self, right? A limited consciousness perceiving a person, if you will, a you, a me, an I.
An
And I think
ego.
she tries to
Yeah.
take, yeah, I think she tries to take that away and show you, no, you're not that. Like you are limitless. Your potential is never ending and you are eternal.
So, Julian, you mentioned Buddhism earlier, and I wanted to ask you about that because while I have worked with Lilith many times, I haven't worked with her in what I perceive to be like somewhat of a devotional um, capacity, like you have. I don't know if that's the word you would use or not. I guess I'll give you a second to speak for yourself on that matter. Do you view your relationship with Lilith as devotional, or would you give it another word?
I almost have to go towards Hinduism with that and say it's almost bhakti, where it's
Bhakti?
almost
Yeah.
like a form, yeah, it's like a form of
Yeah.
devotional love. Like she's
Okay.
my eternal love, and I see it
So
like that as like a soulmate piece. So like I'm devoted to her eternally, yes. Yeah.
it's less like because and that's an important distinction because I feel like when most people think about devotion, they think about like following the deity around like to like serve it, whereas bhakti is like seeking like union with it,
Yeah. Yep.
like through like dharana, other forms of meditation. So excellent.
Hmm.
I'm glad that you clarified that for me. So when now I have to remember where I was going with this. So because you seem to have a stronger connection, I guess is what I'll say with Lilith, and you're also somewhat aware of Buddhism, from what I hear, from what I gather. I was wondering if so. Have you ever heard of the entity Vajrayogini?
Not really, no.
Okay, she's a somewhat new entity as far as Buddhism goes. Um, but I have worked with her a little bit as the consort of Vajrasattva. And this all ties into the relationship of ceremonial magic and shamanism via the root of Buddhism, which is, I believe, Bonpo. And the idea that Vajrasattva and Vajrayogini are something like consorts. And this
Hmm.
reminds me of like the Idala and the Pingala uniting to the Shushumna. And so hearing of this, I wanted to study more the consort of Vajrasattva, or the understanding of I guess Vajra could be translated as something like lightning or energy. So I wanted to understand the consort of that understanding of energy. So I started looking into Vajrayogini. I wasn't sure if you are aware of her because she's relatively new, but she gave me a very Nahimeth Lilith vibe, almost like a little sister or cousin, but at the same time, almost I don't know. It was the same, but it was almost like an aspect. Like you know how they talk about like green Tara or white
Yeah,
Tara? It was almost like this
yeah,
Vajra Yogini entity was like Red Lilith. Like
yeah,
very passionate, very like tempting in like almost a like falling off a cliff like kind of way without even looking where you're going. But yeah, it almost reminded me of like a red Lilith and the way that they talk about like green Tara and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a giant word salad, but I'm struggling to try to express what I experienced. So I wasn't sure if you had worked with that entity, Vajrayogini, at all, and or what your connection and understanding of Buddhism was as far as like the ceremonial practice of it was, like
yeah.
their actual ritual implements and gestures and things like that.
So when I started with Buddhism, I got very into Theravadan Buddhism, which reminds me a bit of nihilism, and it's kind of the path of annihilation. It's almost saying, like, I do not want to exist anymore. I do not want to exist again. It's to say I want complete union with the divine and the one true aspect, and I no longer want to perceive self. I just want to
Released
be.
from samsara. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yep. Yeah. So that's the Theravadan path, and I followed that for a long time because that's what I thought I wanted was to no longer be. And
sure.
I've kind of moved away from that. And so I had a chance actually to go to rehab. And during that time, I got to go to a Buddhist monastery and spend about 3 months living there in a Zen Buddhist
Wow.
practice, which was really cool. And so about 8 to 9 hours a day were spent in silent meditation, staring at a wall. And then we would eat a meal together, usually like fish and some veggies. Like they ate some meat, but never like red meat or anything like that. And it was very cool. And then on Sundays, we would have like a mass almost where we would do chants and call upon different bodhisattvas and stuff like that, and call upon compassion to the world and different stuff like that. But the Zen tradition kind of opened me up to the way of being, to acceptance, to like it was okay just to sit with whatever you were and whatever you were perceiving, and that was okay for you to experience, instead of fighting it or trying to give too much weight to whatever you were experiencing. It was okay just to acknowledge, see it, let it go, and it passes. And so
Sure.
Zen's
Yeah.
really stuck out to me. But I guess so much for me was not as much as understanding the deities within inside Buddhism as it was reaching for what I believe to be enlightenment and understanding of what I am as consciousness, I guess.
Sure.
And for me, that's led to a path of obviously magic and different practices and a very syncretic approach. But it's been entirely Buddhist the entire time, where I've been reaching for no self, where I want to perceive no separation between what I am and what I don't perceive myself to be.
Mm.
And that the illusion of Maya falls away. There's just enough of me to keep playing the game, right? Like And that, I think that's the appreciation that Buddhism and enlightenment gives. Even though enlightenment is a journey and never ending, there's no solid destination, and we can't ever say we truly have attained it. I believe that the moment of realization, that saying like, I don't really want anything, but like I want enough to be, is a beautiful takeaway from it,
Yeah, man, that resonates with me as well. Like seeking the path of like no return, no longer wanting to be like definitely resonates with me very deeply. That was part of the reason that I started looking into more like Clipothic and chthonic underworld infernal traditions was because I'm like, I gotta find a way out of here.
Or
Uh,
like, or like how much worse can it get, right?
so definitely how it seemed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then also like mudras and different gestures, within Buddhist ideology. I think
Mhm.
a foundation for physical symbology that creates a gateway to the subconscious,
Yes.
which further branches out in meditation to bring you, as you mentioned, deeper within, right? Because that's where the answers lie. That's where your truth is. It lies within you. You can look out as much as you want and try to take in as much intellectual knowledge as you can and try to understand, but you can't lean on that and say, okay, this is right, that's right, this is that, whatever. No, just like stop trying to understand and just accept, and then move inward and be like, what am I? Who am I? And what is this? Right? And the answers are there.
And the gestures, the mudras as well, they have a subconscious and unconscious effect, but they also have a very practical, pragmatic effect as well by pushing on different like acupressure points, different activating different parts of the nervous system, different like glands, like the adrenal gland, the thyroid gland, things like that, can create rises in consciousness or drops in consciousness if you learn to correlate your endocrine system with, say, the chakra system or something like that. And you learn mantra and mudra, or perhaps if you learn, like yantra, mantra, tantra, whatever, and you direct that toward different levels, like it can absolutely lead to a better spiritual experience. The mudras are crucial. I think also another parallel is like the purba or the vajra. There's another name for it as well, but it's almost like their athame. It's a representation of a diamond lightning bolt, and they use it very much like an athame, from what I can tell, oftentimes in ritualistic ways. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from that, and also like the assumption. There's an element of the assumption of God forms too, which like there's a
Yeah.
parallel to ceremonial magic in that as well. So it's just super interesting.
And I think breath control, doing single nostril breathing, bellows breath, all that,
Mhm.
and exciting your nervous system and or, bringing it back down and slowing it, and stuff is extremely powerful with meditation and changing your consciousness, As you
Yeah,
mentioned, we talked about psychedelics earlier, but you can reach all those states with, just your own body and sobriety and moving through different breathing techniques, different focuses, different mudras, and things like that, and shifting the way that you are perceiving awareness.
absolutely. I was just saying that in another discussion, if not yesterday, the day before, where I found that psychedelics typically do two useful things for people. They either show them something or somewhere that they didn't know existed previously, or they allow them to sever or dissolve things that are preventing them from getting to those places that they do perceive. And
Yeah.
once we do perceive them, and once those things have been severed, like I think it is really about doing it from the inside,
Hmm.
through different means of meditation, essentially.
And I think to tie it together, like going back to the clip off and Buddhism, I think a lot of the ideas are to create non-attachment,
Yes.
and separate
Yes.
desire, but create will and self-drive to not be in ego form where you're constantly driven by lower desires, but
Hmm.
then having higher desires because you're more aligned with the divinity within. But I think that directly relates to Buddhism and the Anatman and the no self and those ideas, and stuff like that, because it's the same concept of separating self from the anxieties of life and what we perceive ourselves to be
100%.
to become the greater thing we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in my experience so far, that's what enlightenment has been so much more in my experience, at least this far, about letting go of things rather than collecting them. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that resonates with you guys or not, but it seems to be more about like, I don't know, letting go than collecting. I don't know. Internally, anyway.
What do
I
you think, Elijah?
I have a question for both of y'all because y'all both
Okay.
to be experienced with maybe advanced forms of meditation and all types of meditations. Um, what are some of y'all's favorite meditations and also maybe one that you do the most, maybe daily? I know Julian mentioned the solar meditation, but maybe
What
y'all could give
I
a
I have I have several that I do every day. Um, so if there's just like one or two that you want to mention briefly that are really powerful, because I could go on and on and on and on.
I
maybe
guess, go ahead, go ahead.
give one for beginners and your favorite.
Julian?
So my favorite would probably be doing bellows breath breathing mixed with doing deep breaths. And so you do like 4 rounds of bellows breath for about 30 seconds, which is doing like the,
Yep.
like hyperventilating almost. And then you can switch to slow breathing where you're taking a lot of oxygen, so you're replenishing. And that brings you to this vibrational state. You can start to feel it within your being. And when you start to feel that, you know that your consciousness is shifting, and it's so easy to break into that subconscious layer of disintegration or nothing, where you're in that empty space to do what you want to. And then I think, secondly, a major thing that is important for beginners is creating an astral temple that you meditate into
Yes.
regularly.
Inner temple work,
I
man.
think for
Absolutely.
I think for some people, an altar and a physical presence in your home is kind of unapproachable. But what you can do is create in your mind this beautiful space where you can go in and do ritual and meditate within yourself. And you can take that anywhere and every day upon that place and make it different or better or whatever you want to do, and that's your own. And I think that's a great thing that beginners should step into.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think that's an excellent suggestion. That is literally one of the first places that I suggest people start. If I don't suggest starting there, I start with the chakra meditation. It depends. A lot of what I do is tailoring to the specific person that I'm talking with. But yeah, that what I often refer to as inner temple work is excellent because it gives you a starting point. It gives you a seed that will bear fruit later. And especially because a lot of times, like their consciousness is drifting from subject to subject every day. So their astral awareness, their mind's eye, so to speak, is drifting along with that as well. But if you can just do something as simple and foundational as creating an inner temple, as I've said, that can start to create consistency in your presence and your mind and then your world, where then you can actually start to have some solidarity and to start to have some more control in your life.
I have questions about the inner temple. So when you say to meditate there, do you picture yourself there? Or do you also maybe picture yourself building it? Or do
I
you
think
uh
starting with building it is a great place. But also here's something else that I want to mention is like my inner temple isn't your inner temple. So like your inner temple could be a fucking forest. It could be a celestial landscape. Mine personally is subterra, underground. Literally, in that space is one of the most fundamental things you can do for yourself.
Okay.
I think it trains focus too, which is really important, because focus
Hmm.
is such a powerful thing in meditation and magic. And if you can create that astral, mental temple in your mind's eye and create that visualization within you, you are so powerfully creating with your focus, you know what I mean? And training yourself. As we spoke earlier on discipline, it's a foundational principle you need.
Yeah, yeah. You're like focus is like a laser that if you point yourself at it long enough, it will burn a hole into the reality that you're pointing it at. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How
Well,
often do y'all meditate in that way?
I mean, every single day. That's a huge part of my practice
yeah.
is training that faculty.
What's maybe the first meditation y'all do?
Yeah. So, do you have any other meditations that you or visualizations that you wanted to suggest, just off the top of your head?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Julian.
Um, Not really, but I did want to touch on, I feel like for some people, visualization is hard to approach. And I
Uh-huh.
feel like if you can even create in your mind's eye a color, a this, a that, something simple, your temple does not need to be elaborate. It could just be purple. You know what I mean? Like
Dude, thank you.
if that's all
Yes.
you got, that's fucking sick. Like
Yes.
nothing wrong with that. So that's all I had to
Well
add.
said. Well said. Well, so I guess there's like I will offer 2 to 3 visualizations because I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. But I guess before you mentioned breath work as well, and I think that the breath work is a huge precursor to the visualization for a couple reasons. One, because the more relaxed and or focused you are, that will affect your concentration. But also, two, when you get into certain practices like pranayama or Wim Hof breathing or other forms of cyclical hyperventilation, you can start to release different neurotransmitters like oxytocin or dimethyltryptamine. And you can have, so that can help with these visual experiences that you're trying to have. So I wanted to state that briefly. And so you can do, and you can, so I guess one more thing to say about that is what I call the elect, not really an accurate name, but it's just a really simple thing. You can excite yourself by taking longer and deeper inhales than exhales. And I call that the electric breath because it excites. And if you take it, because it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. And so if you're wanting to do an exciting ritual, you're going to do something like that. But if you're like an ecstatic ritual, but if you're wanting to do something more trancy and calm, you would do something like a magnetic breath, which is a longer exhale than inhale. And that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So, which is the rest digest part of the physiology. So, knowing that can help in the meditation as well. So, I just wanted to briefly mention that before I mentioned any actual visualizations. Was there anything that you guys wanted to mention about that, the
Well,
breath work?
the breathing in more than or longer than exhale, I've
Hmm.
actually done that before
Hmm.
because I'm aware that I actually learned about that through learning about sexual transmutation,
Sure.
like rising above the lower desires.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I heard that that breath technique is good for that.
It absolutely is. And the first, okay, so the first breath technique I teach anyone is box breathing or the square breath, which is an equal inhale, in hold, exhale, exhale. It's the whole time you're doing it does whether it's 2 heartbeats or 2 seconds, 2 Mississippi, whatever. You want to do those equally because that's going to stabilize you. If you're going to get into excitatory trance or whatever, you need to be able to also reset yourself. So I wanted to offer that. offer that as well. But
That's where I
yeah,
started. So
box breathing. Yeah, very good.
yeah.
So but yeah, was there something else? I feel like I forgot something else that you mentioned, Elijah.
Hmm. I'm
You
not sure.
said something. Okay, so I guess I'll just move on. The two visualizations that I typically will teach someone are the inner temple and or the it's essentially a chakra meditation or a chakra meditation, but it's a little bit more than that because it allows it's like a combination of rising on the plains with a chakra meditation. And just very, very, very briefly, the way that that goes, and you can get really fucking into this, excuse my French, but you can get really into this. Essentially what you do is you start at the base chakra at Muladhara and you imagine that glowing red, deep red energy at the base of your spine. And as you imagine that, you also come into awareness with the earth below you and you begin to breathe that red energy from the earth into that sphere. And you essentially do this all the way up. But
Hmm.
the way that I do it and the way that I suggest or offer goes from the earth to the moon to the sun, because the sun relates to the Manipura chakra, and the moon somewhat relates to, I keep trying to say Yesod, but it's um, Muladhara, is it Svadhisthana? Yeah. So then you go from the earth to the moon to the sun, then you see the solar system and you're breathing in the green energy from the solar system because of the anahata chakra representing harmony and balance and stability. So we've moved up, we're rising on the planes with each chakra, and then we go from the solar system to the actual galaxy itself as we move up into the throat. And as we're doing this, we're drawing resources from the earth, we're drawing creativity from the moon. We're drawing power from the sun. We're drawing harmony from the solar system. We're drawing expression from the galaxy and all of the voices that exist in all of the planets. Then we move up into the third eye and we see the cosmos at large, all vision of all the eyes that are within all of those galaxies. And then we move up into the Sahasrara chakra and we see the universe, the multiverse, all of those cosmoses as one. I tend to see one with nine others surrounding it in like a mirror sphere kind of way. But yeah, and then we just absorb the energies from those, the creativity, the vision, the expression, and then we come back down and reground ourselves into the Muladhara chakra. And every technique that I teach can be transmuted into an infernal technique. You can go below down with these as well. But this is I don't typically teach that first. So yeah,
Hmm.
the inner temple and the chakra meditations are the basic uh, visualizations and meditations I would practice. But otherwise, for more advanced practitioners, what's known as pathworking and visual pathworking, especially, I mean, it can be a game changer if you're ready for it.
By that, do you
And I
mean
would say
um
I would just say passing the demon is like entirely crazy, you know? Like you can go so deep into yourself with like a certain demon that you're very like have a great affinity with. They will
Yep.
really reveal some stuff about you. It's quite insane.
by that do you guys mean path working as in within a book or visualizing associated with certain things?
Well, I guess I brought it up, so I'll say what I'll give my experience of path working very, very, very briefly, and then I'll let Julian speak for themselves. So for me, pathworking, when I talk about pathworking, I'm talking about exploring yourself.
Hmm.
Because pathworking can also be an intellectual and an intuitional exercise as well. The second that you realize, hey, the deity Aphrodite makes me feel a very loving way, you've created a correspondence. You've identified a signature. And that is a form of pathworking as well because you're expanding your little node of consciousness a little bit further. But then
Hmm.
there's also visual pathworking and energetic pathworking. So astral and etheric or water and fire pathworking as well. So that's what I'm saying. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. You can find that in some books. um, Scrying on the Tree of Life, which is the second part of a Garden of Pomegranates, offers a wonderful introduction to pathworking. But you don't have to get it from a book. Like literally, walk around in the forest of your mind. You'll find things. Spend time in that purple space. That, for those of you that sounds simple to, there's beauty and simplicity. There's such a depth and elegance to that suggestion that I had to highlight it again. But yeah, what has your experience of pathworking been so far, Julian? If you don't mind me asking.
So I feel like a little bit like path working and shadow work kind of tie together for me.
Hmm,
Definitely what you said, definitely going inward and kind of questioning self. Like sometimes it's a journaling session for me where I
sure.
start with a question and I unfold almost into like automatic writing from myself where I then have to reanalyze it later and look at like what was actually said, what can I take away from that. But also like kleptothic path working, which I know Corbin, you've definitely touched upon in your channel. I think is huge, like working the tunnels of Set, if you're working within the kleptothic system, is a big thing because those are certain paths that are already pre-built with inside like reality and yourself that you can confront to almost face your fears. So like I'm probably gonna misspeak here, but I want to say like Nianthiel was like confronting about like the masks like you wear and the masks on others, and breaking down that perception to where you actually start to see people for like who they really are and like what their intentions are for you and themselves and stuff like that. So you stop seeing a lot of the bullshit and you start seeing like, okay, like yeah, I get that person's like kind of a POS. Like they don't really have the best out for me. I'm gonna probably stop talking to them for my own self-respect. And pathworking can work in a lot of ways like that, but it's a lot of deep reflection and talking with your own self. But then building into it with a demonic energy where you're having mental transference or communication with that energy, and you can ask them questions about yourself and have them prod you with deeper questions to push you further is such an amazing thing because there's some things I won't probably ask myself, but then they're like, boom, here it is. And I'm like, all right, I guess we're doing it.
The fuse
So
has
that's
been
kind of
lit.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I love how you bring up shadow work too, because I mean that's where it all leads to. I found in my experience anyway, and I mean I work with a lot of other people, and it always seems to sort of have that effect. Like whether it's approached for that purpose or not, it seems to untie knots and sever foul connections. By knowing who you are, you know what you need a little more, I guess. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
So, relating to meditation, I have a question for you guys. As I said, y'all are probably into all types of meditation and a lot of visualizing with it. But do you guys also do meditations where you try to visualize and think about nothing?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I think about that as like void meditation, and I think that's very crucial. I think that I, well, I wouldn't say I do it as much. I wonder if I should do that as much, if as much as I do active meditation.
I think I've actually done a good amount of that,
Mm, hmm
as well as the
I feel
total
like
meditations, but probably uh like a good ratio, like not a too low percentage of the void meditation.
mm,
I feel like getting to the no thing space or that empty space in meditation is almost like a precursor out of the times that I step into ritual because it allows me to then gain my focus because I'm from a space of nothing. I can then
mm.
create whatever I want to focus on and have my attention be set. However, I'm
Sure.
not saying that's easy for me to reach. I have ADHD and deal with that. So like already my mind's constantly going on many thoughts. But as I can watch the river of it go by and I can see each thought go by, and we go with that Zen approach, and I say, okay, thought, I acknowledge you. I'm not going to lend any more thought to you. I'm going to let you pass. And you keep doing that, so on and so forth. About 20 minutes in, there's no thought anymore. And you're like, whoa, you know. And that voice in your head's like, hey, I'm here. And it all starts kind of, you know.
Oh yeah.
Almost like it's like the starting point, and then it all goes from there.
Well, man, I could not agree with you more. And I can tell, I don't know if you would call it this or not. I'm not even sure I would call it, but I can tell that you have shamanic experience when you say that. Because, or voyaging experience perhaps, because the first and perhaps most impactful shamanic voyage or initiation I ever put myself on, I realized that I was trying to have a vision quest essentially. And for the first few hours, I was attaching to the first input or stimulus that I would
Mm-hmm.
receive visually or energetically. Or, or
Mm-hmm.
or intellectually, wind, fire, water, wherever the impulse and inputs were, I would respond to them. And then I realized that I wasn't going anywhere. And I saw myself sitting in a river. And I saw every one of those distractions or impressions, which I then started calling imps, these impressions that would pop up and try to distract me, I would detach from them. And then I found myself going down the river, down the stream, until I actually ended up somewhere. I
Yeah.
actually found myself someplace that was
Yep.
significant and real and wasn't a fleeting, ephemeral imp, so to speak.
Yep. No, I feel it, man.
Cool stuff, cool stuff. But even though I feel like we could go on a lot
Yeah, no, we could keep going and going.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But we're about to run out of time, so we'll wrap it up for now and we'll save a lot more and keep experiencing things to share with y'all for the next time. But it was nice having you guys. Thank you, Corbin and Julian.
Thank
I'll leave
you.
their channel links below.
Namaste.
Hmm.
Like and subscribe and go follow them. Any last words y'all wanted to say?
Be safe. Have a good night. And yeah, feel free to ask questions. Don't be scared to ask questions.
For sure.
Make smart choices. We love y'all.
All right. Bye,
Peace,
y'all.
everybody.